Howdy, partner. Today we are going to discuss one of the chronologically earliest stories in the Dresden Files universe, A Fistful of Warlocks. This book follows Anastasia Luccio, who's a warden of the White Council, on a mission that she has to bring in some warlocks in a western town. This warlock is up to no good, and by no good, I mean he's doing necromancy, and that's one of the laws of magic that's getting broken, and you know the White Council has to deal with this. We all know that zombies are bad, I don't feel like I need to really explain that to y'all. We're all on the same page here. This is a very juicy story if you've read the Dresden Files already, but if you haven't gotten into the Dresden Files and you just want to read a short story to sort of see if the author's style is your style, I highly recommend it because this is a great place to start. And it's a place where you won't really get spoiled for anything. Kinda. And hey, if you pick up the Dresden Files, you might actually, think more of these characters when they come along in the story. Like the other videos that I've made on this series, we're going to talk about this story in the context of the story so far. So we're only going to talk about the stuff that happens in this story. And then I'm going to give you a spoiler warning, and then we're going to talk about how this story ties into the rest of the series, any sort of theories or little Easter eggs that come out. We're going to talk about those then. Don't worry, I'll give you a spoiler warning if you really need a spoiler warning, but I highly suggest that you stay till the end of the video because this is some good stuff. In the Dresden Files series, short stories are basically canon, so it's really important to also have the context that comes from those stories, or else things are going to feel kind of weird when you read the actual novels. I've definitely had a couple points of confusion, especially in the last couple novels that we've gotten so far, Peace Talks and Battleground, where I did not have the context from the short stories in order to be like, oh, this is who this character is, or this is what this thing is, or this is sort of their motivation. And I feel like if I had done a better job of keeping up with the short stories on my first read through, I would have gotten a lot more out of it. So this story is included in the book Briefcases, and it also gives us an opportunity to sort of see Luccio when she was a much younger warden. Not really a spoiler for the new folks, but Jim Butcher has done enough of her backstory that he could basically write a 5-book series. And I'm all for that. If he wants to write a series after he's done with the Dresden Files that covers wizards in the American West, I am all for it. But hey, we've probably got a decade until that happens, so it's not going to happen for a very, very, very long time, at least in book years. The series so far. Anastasia Luccio is assigned on a mission to track down Alexander Page, necromancer, in Dodge City, a western frontier town that makes most of its money off cattlemen looking for a good time, and not the residents who think very little of their benefactors. Luccio determines that there is actually 4 warlocks in this town. Usually a warden can take on 1 or 2 at a time. We know that the captain of the wardens at this time, Ebenezer McCoy, has taken on 3 at a time, but he's a lot more powerful than Luccio is. So when she finds that there's 4, she knows that she is in trouble. She needs to call for backup. This is not good. She did not sign up for this. Yeah. Basically. And yeah, she's gonna have a rough time. She meets the town's deputy, Wyatt Earp, who agrees to help her bring these guys in. Earp is a member of the Venatori, which is a group that's allied with the White Council, but we don't really know very much about them at this point. But basically, he knows that magic is real, he knows that the White Council exists, he knows that these guys are much worse news than he could ever possibly imagine, and so that sort of has him skip a little bit of the learning curve on being useful to Luccio. We already talked about how Luccio was a warden of the White Council and therefore responsible for enforcing the 7 laws of magic. And we've also sort of touched on the fact that necromancy is against the laws of magic, and it's also a really bad idea. I'm from Atlanta, so Walking Dead is here, and yeah, we all know where this is going. They end up fighting the necromancers and the zombies that are crawling on top of the building, and it's a really epic fight. Now, this is definitely one of the better fight scenes in the entire series, I think, and that's not a knock to the other fight scenes, but you can definitely tell that Jim Butcher wrote this story later on after he'd had a lot of practice writing Dresden's fight scenes, and it was just really, really good, and I enjoyed it, and yeah, nerding out a little bit over here, but let's get back to the point. Luccio's inner dialogue reads a lot like Harry's would, but with maybe a little bit of a twist. But we also know that Jim Butcher, because he said this a lot before, really likes to write young hothead characters. And since Lucio's a lot younger, because this is about 150 years before the Dresden Files series is a thing, it makes sense that somebody who would sign up to be a warden would be a little bit of a hothead and enjoy a good fight. This is the point where I need to start talking about spoilers, so if you haven't read through book 7, which is Deadbeat, I suggest that you like, share, subscribe, and decide to come back to this video at a later date. Trust me on this one, there's some good stuff coming, but you don't want it spoiled. Series-wide spoilers in 3, 2, 1. First, a little bit of an Easter egg. Ebenezer McCoy can take 3 warlocks on in a fight. This sort of explains why Harry, because he's Ebenezer's grandson, has so much power. It's just genetic to be that good. Also, McCoy was captain of the Wardens about the same time that his daughter, Margaret Le Fay, would have been an adult. Word of Jim says that McCoy would have lost his wife around 1810, which means that Margaret would have had to be born before then, which is a little bit before the timeline really puts her there. So I don't know if this was like a continuity error or if something else was going on. So if the Dodge City in the story is actually Dodge City, Kansas, which is a real place, that puts this story happening sometime in the 1870s. Since Dodge City was founded in 1871, we know that the story has to take place sometime after 1871. We don't know exactly what Margaret was doing, but we know that she's generally been a thorn in the side of the White Council. She's arrogant and idealistic and just not easy to control. And people don't like that. So why was her dad a warden? McCoy is also the same man who said some very insulting things about the White Council to Harry when he was a teenager, and then when Harry repeated them in front of the White Council people in Summer Night, they were very, very offended. So, why did McCoy become a warden if he doesn't even believe in these people and he just, doesn't like them or respect them at all? There must have been an ulterior motive, so maybe it had something to do with his daughter? Was he trying to keep tabs on her? Was he trying to keep other wardens from getting on her trail? Did he just enjoy fighting? I mean, yeah. Did he want to just be able to throw down whenever he wanted to in officially sanctioned ways? Maybe. It would make sense for his character. We also know that in the book Blood Rights, McCoy admits to starting the New Madrid earthquakes. These earthquakes happened in the central Mississippi Valley, and they were felt all the way to Washington, D.C., Quebec, New York. It was a widespread event, y'all. And yes, sadly, these earthquakes did cause people to no longer be with us. Since these earthquakes occurred in a time period between 1811 and 1812, we've got to assume that McCoy was the Blackstaff by then. This would also be a year after he lost his wife. Maybe being captain of the Wardens was just a cover for him to be able to pull off his Blackstaff duties. And maybe he ended up as a Blackstaff after he was grieving the loss of his wife. I see a backstory coming here. So I guess coming back to the point of the story, if the Blackstaff can only throw down with 3 warlocks at the same time, Luccio is royally screwed trying to throw down with 4. And yet, she and Wyatt Earp end up doing it. That's pretty badass. Alexander Page might have been Lucio's target, but she ended up surviving a battle with, of all people, Himmler and his apprentice Gravane. Honestly, Himmler and his disciples deserve a video, or a series of videos, dedicated to them, their backstory, and their shenanigans. After all, you don't get Mab of all people calling you a monster without being some kind of nasty. But I think it's really interesting to look at the villain in this moment and see sort of where he was power-wise when he was in Dodge City. So the first time that the White Council thought that they had Himmler pinned down was the 1890s, which means that this story takes place 20 years before that. Now, I'm not sure how much of a power-up he could have gotten in those 20 years, but we're going to assume that it's not several orders of magnitude more than where he is in the story. We also know that since Himmler was destroyed for realsies this time, or at least what we assume to be for realsies, in the 1960s, we know that he also had Bob for 40 years. So that means that he got Bob in the 1920s, which means that he does not have Bob in his service at the time of the story back in the 1870s. This means that omitting Bob from the story isn't really a big deal. He doesn't even come into the story until way after. So there's no evil Bob doing things in the background. And so if you decide to go back and read the story trying to find Bob, you're not going to find him. Now, this still doesn't make me feel any better, and it didn't make the White Council feel any better, but it probably contributed to Luccio actually making it out alive on this one. This short story also serves as sort of an origin story for Gravane, who becomes a big baddie villain in Deadbeat. But I think we can all agree that zombies climbing up a building is terrifying and probably makes a great origin story for Gravane to end up being a very, very nasty villain 150 years later on when Dresden gets to fight him. I haven't gotten to this point in my reread, so I'm going to save more comments on that particular thing for later. I know I've already talked about this, but I would really like to see more of Wyatt Earp. Maybe we'll get him in the spin-off series. Maybe he'll come back later on in Dresden Files. I don't know. I like this guy. I like him a lot. One last thing to go over, and this sort of falls into the category of things that I wish I knew more about, but is probably done on purpose because it would give up major spoilers for the big apocalyptic trilogy. But Alexander Page and his buddies were part of the Thule Society. And this group is sort of like a foe of the White Council and the Venatori, and they're kind of like secret baddies. This group wears necklaces with a twisted skull and a slanted cross on them, and this is really the only series where I could find any information whatsoever on this group of people. I think that the Thule Society and the Venatori will become a lot more important as we get closer to the big apocalyptic trilogy, but we don't really know much about them. I checked the wiki, I checked Reddit, and I don't feel like I know everything that there is to know about them at this point, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. Hey y'all, Editing B here. Apparently I lied about that being the last thing that I talk about because I missed something very, very important. So this is one of the few short stories that we get in the Dresden Files universe that is not from Harry Dresden's perspective. And this is huge because most of the information that we get fed about this universe comes through his sort of worldview, his lens, and we are limited by what Harry knows. So the fact that we get a story from Luccio's perspective is huge, and this story basically tells us from her own mouth just how scary of a guy that Kemmler was, and just how big of a problem that the necromancers were going to be, and how anybody who could throw down with them or anybody who was seen as a possible ally of them was freaking terrifying and was definitely on the top of the warden's list of people to make sure it did not become a problem. And I think that this might sort of help us understand a little bit more of what the White Council and what the other wizards in the wizarding community thought about all these sort of bad guys and anybody who in any sort of way was associated with them. I'm going to try to do all of the short stories as I go along in the series. I have maybe 2 or 3 more stories that I need to go over before I can continue on with the series. Most of the short stories are sort of between books like 10 and 15, and that is definitely going to slow down this reread, but it's really fun when I get to find a bunch of things in the short stories that are really important to my understanding of Dresden Files as a whole and different theories and stuff. And they're things that not a lot of people have read. I know that you can buy the collections of short stories, but I feel like a lot of people don't touch them, and they're just such a gold mine of information. So I'm really looking forward to being able to cover that too. If you like what I do, please hit the subscribe button and join the Caffeination. We'd love to have you. I post videos basically whenever I can get around to doing it because I am a busy adult with a lot of important things to do. I do love interacting with y'all in the comments. Like, there's some really good discussions going on down there, and I basically respond to those a lot faster than I get videos out because it's a lot easier for me to research enough to make a good comment and to talk with people about things than it is for me to make these videos because they are a lot of work. And if you think that I suck at this whole Dresden Files thing, leave me a comment down below and I'll try to suck better next time. Bye.